It's simple. I mean, it kind of works. You have more room, you can put more effects on top. This way it sounds way more interesting.
Take flight. You are my ecstasy.
Hey guys, welcome to the vlog. It's a nice sunny Sunday. No one here in the office. All of them have their day off, of course. I'm still here to try and make music as much as I can for as long as I can here in this beautiful studio. I know the speakers are still not perfectly aligned, but since I'm today just taking care of creative stuff and starting a new song, this shouldn't be a problem. Today I will use something quite simple as the starting point. As you know, like a month ago I made a special sample pack with starting points for you. I'm using the melodic techno one. So if you're interested to do the same as I do today and just start with the same template that I created, it basically has a bass in it, an arpeggiator, and like a top melody line. And we'll go from there. You can just download it. It's the first link in the description. And that entire sample pack is around 2 gigabytes and it's pay what you want. So you can get it for $1 or for whatever you feel like contributing for getting these kind of samples. This entire song isn't in my usual style. It's all just about testing the new gear and also like freeing up my mind a little bit, just doing something else and making a song that I actually not intend releasing. It's a whole nother story if you just work kind of for the creation of just making something without having in the back of your mind, is it actually something that fits to your style? Is it something that you can release with your artist name? All of this is today aside, just focusing on trying to make something fun. So first up, let me play you what we got. Very simple drums. Actually just a kick, a bass line. A very simple one made with Diva, and then we got the arpeggiator. Also simple, also with Diva, and then the third is like a weird top line that plays a little here and there. And the main sound of it is actually a bass, but sometimes the notes go up or really down, so it transforms into a main synth. Just some random notes for that underground feel. The first thing I usually do is mute everything except for kick and bass. If you get that balance right, everything is a whole lot easier. So let's listen to kick and bass. For my taste, the bass is way too high up there. The cutoff is way too open. I will dial it down and make it like cooler and deeper. And then the first task would be actually to tame the bass, make sure that you get rid of the very low end. We won't need that. Cutting here at 32 Hz with 24 dB per octave. But this can really depend on the notes that you're playing. The further down you go the notes, the more low end you will have, the more you have to cut away. Maybe if your bass is too low, you might have to put it an octave higher. If it's too high, maybe one lower. Or maybe if both do not really work, change either the key of the song to get to different notes, or maybe have a low octave and a high octave both on at the same time and get a balance between both by just mixing one of them into the other to have like a round full bass that fills out the low end without making it too muddy. Next up, to help even a bit more, sidechaining. I'm using by X-Fair Records the LFL tool. Now it's like exaggerated. Every time the kick hits, the bass is turned down in volume, so it starts really pumping. And depending on the style of the song, you want that pumping to be audible, especially for big room music and progressive house. That pumping actually makes a whole lot of the style. If you make more deep house music, you want to kind of cover up that pumping a little bit. Here for this melodic techno song, we will just go right in the middle and make it a little bit audible. You can play around with how much you actually want to cut out the bass whenever the kick hits. Now I've listened again a little bit to it, and there's a delay on top of the bass line, which you not always really wanted to have in there. But I think for this minimal style of a song, it's actually quite interesting to have it on there. But it needs a little bit of tweaking, so I will increase the side volume a tiny bit and make sure that only the higher frequencies are playing for that delay, so that we cut away the low frequencies of the delay so it doesn't get muddy again in the low end. I think like this is quite good. You can still hear the delay. It's emphasizing, it's making the bass more interesting, but it's still not like getting in the way of everything else. Now let's mix a tiny bit the arpeggiator. Here, same thing, getting rid of the low end. We will cut here around 100 Hertz. When I cut something, when I cut the low end of something, I usually cut into the sound so that I can actually hear that the low frequencies are being cut so that the sound gets thin. Let's maybe solo the arp really quick. This would be around 150 Hertz for this sound. So that's too thin, obviously. So usually what I want to do is like reduce the volume, the frequency of the fundamental. Like here it's right above 100 Hertz. And if you cut into it a tiny bit, it will actually reduce that one frequency and give you a more equal sound and get rid of the low end at the same time. I'm not going to do anything fancy like raising the top end or anything like that, because I'm still not sure about the sound. I will actually first go into Diva and tweak it a tiny bit. Also here the cutoff seems to be a little bit too open, at least like for an intro part of a song. The decay was a little bit too short, so opening that up. And now just testing really quick what the arpeggiator might sound like when later on in the song you open up the cutoff, if it's enough, or if I might actually have to layer it with something else that is a lot brighter. That's actually enough. You can also see in the analyzer. It's covering plenty of frequencies, so we can keep the song very minimal, just like kick, bass, arpeggiator, and here and there the top melody. Next up we will go into that main melody synth that is doing a bunch of random stuff. That one can be actually really nice, but you have to use it sparingly, just here and there, sometimes in little breaks, because it's actually already clashing with the arpeggiator, and it's also already clashing with the bass if you open up the cutoff. So right now it's a very, very, very minimal song, but there is still not enough space to put all of them into the mix. So you can actually see how limited a mix can be. You have like kick, bass, this covers the low end. Then you have usually chords or a main synthesizer covering like the mid to mid top frequencies. Maybe you have a little bit of room for voice in there, but even that is like really hard to actually accomplish. And another main synthesizer is already too much, at least when they're playing at the same time. So let's play all of it at the same time. So I would actually, in the arrangement, decide not to let them all play at the same time. I think this is like one of the most important mixing lessons. If you can't mix it, it's just too much going on at the same time, and you then have to fix it with the arrangement. It's like a big part of mixing, actually, to make sure that certain parts of a song are not playing at the same time. It's like a classic example, guitar and vocals. It's hard to mix. You can either pan the guitar to the sides and let the vocal be in the middle. This kind of sometimes works, but if you want to have it crystal clear, you actually have to dial down the frequencies of the guitar, either filter it or just cut away the frequencies that are the same as in the vocal, just to make room for it. And here in this case, I would actually go for lowering the cutoff of the arpeggiator whenever this other melody is playing, or maybe even stopping the arpeggiator entirely and create a call and response. This always works and makes a song more interesting because it's not everything playing at the same time. It's like element A and then element B and then maybe element C and back to A again. This is way more interesting to listen to over the entire duration of like 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes. So just as an example, the melodies aren't perfect. I would actually go in there and tweak it more. But if we cut the arpeggiator whenever this main melody, top melody is playing, we get a whole lot more room. I can increase the volume of it because it doesn't have to compete with something else. And I could now go in there and create something that sounds even richer by maybe adding a lot more of reverb. And maybe also using something totally crazy like the crystallizer. It's simple. I mean, it kind of works. You have more room, you can put more effects on top. This way it sounds way more interesting. So just make sure that not too many elements are playing at the same time. If you have trouble mixing something, that's usually your number one problem, that there is just too much. It's impossible to mix. If you listen to other music, listen to whatever you like, and then analyze in your head how many tracks are actually playing, you will come very quick to the conclusion that it's usually like the kick, snare, and some hi-hats maybe. Then of course a sub bass or maybe even a higher bass on top of it, but usually they play the same notes, so it's more like one sound. Then you got the low chords or like a main synthesizer sound, and then something on top to make it richer and bigger, like pads or something like that. And if there are vocals in there, you have to reduce everything by a lot. I think one of the biggest mistakes is making an instrumental without having the vocals in mind and then actually recording the vocals and trying to squeeze them in there. It won't work. You have to keep frequencies empty to have room for vocals, especially vocals. So I hope this helped you a little bit, like a very minimal kind of song, a very minimal example, but just already with 3 tracks, it's too much. If all of the sounds are big and huge and you combine them, it's just messy. So either have small sounds and this way layer your song up. But if you're doing electronic music, it's usually very simple. It's usually kick, bass, and then one main element, be it vocals or a main synthesizer sound. And that's usually it. Every other sound that is then in there are usually just effects that pop in and out here and there just to keep it interesting over time. A little bit of automation and then making sure that you have like A and B parts, be it a chorus, a verse, a bridge for more pop music, or a break and a drop for more electronic club music. That's usually the way to go. And if you have trouble mixing, just listen to someone else's track and analyze it, and you will realize they're just using a very, very limited amount of tracks. and this way make it way easier. So also, if you're working right now on a track and you have trouble mixing it, maybe strip it down a little bit, just let the key elements stay in there, and you will have a lot easier time to actually get that crisp, clear, huge sound. So I hope those tips will actually help you to advance with your mixing. Again, if it's too full, it's almost impossible to mix. If you have like 30 main synthesizer sounds going on at the same time, you can give it to the best mixing, mastering engineer on the planet. They will still all just do the same thing and get rid of certain tracks, the ones that don't stand out that much, reduce it and make the reduced parts really huge and big with effects, reverb, and a little bit of EQing and compression. So that's my number one mixing advice. Let me know what your number one mixing advice actually is. Just leave it in the comments for everyone else to also learn something. We'll see us tomorrow back again here in the studio. Sign out.